accidents, 7 levels. This iceberg covers some of the most disturbing accidents ever captured on live television. We'll start with some shocking incidents and slowly move deeper into accidents so severe that they permanently changed lives. So let's start at the tip of this iceberg. Level 1. Demo gone wrong. The ladder flexed beneath Chris as he reached the midpoint, and somewhere off-screen, the hosts kept talking, unaware that something was already going wrong. On a quiet afternoon broadcast of QVC, hosts Lisa Robertson and Kevin Steincross were showing off the Telesteps telescoping ladder, a 12-foot aluminum design that had become one of the network's top-selling tools. Lisa introduced the item with excitement, describing how in demand the product had become. Kevin stood next to her while a man named Chris demonstrated the ladder, propping it up beside a mock set wall. They even took a live call from a woman in California who said she used the ladder herself and loved it.
I have a guy coming tomorrow to use it. It is absolutely phenomenal. They used it for redoing my blinds up there for the windows, and it's just everybody loves this ladder.
Right. But just seconds later, as Chris made his way back to the floor, the ladder jolted away from the wall without warning, and Chris, still high up on the rungs, fell flat onto the stage floor.
Feeling? Uh-oh.
Okay, we're gonna make sure that Chris is okay.
And that has never happened.
The hosts tried to recover almost instantly, with Kevin adding that the fall was most likely caused by a slippery floor. This was an attempt to reassure viewers that everything was fine. But behind the scenes, it was clear Chris had narrowly avoided serious harm. For viewers, this unsettling incident was made even more uncomfortable because as a man lay recovering from a fall that millions had just watched in real time, the pitch moved on. Commenters have debated everything from whether the ladder was properly secured to whether the demonstrator had a concussion as a result of the fall. The video of Chris's fall has since become one of the most viral and dissected clips from the world of shopping TV. I also just don't trust a telescoping ladder. I don't want a ladder that can like chug, 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 chug. Like, I know they're not supposed to, but obviously they're not supposed to, but they're still maybe sometimes gonna. I don't know. The 3,000-meter collapse. Publications described it as watching someone being dragged like a rag doll, and that wasn't an exaggeration. 32-year-old Dutch runner Maureen Koster was holding her pace in the women's 3,000-meter final at the 2025 European Indoor Athletics Championships. It was airing live on the Reuters news channel when all of a sudden her foot caught on another runner's stride and sent her flying. Officials had no choice but to run onto the track in the middle of the race and drag her off it before she got trampled by the next lap.
What happens?
Tangle of legs.
It's a tangle of legs. So Sarah Healy is very close, and it does affect Sarah Healy.
Yeah.
But she coped with it very well. But my gosh, that was a heavy fall.
Maureen Koster collided with the track at full force, her body crumpling to the ground. You could tell the moment it happened that something was really wrong. It wasn't one of those quick stumbles where the runner bounces back up. Although the race continued, most of the audience's attention was now diverted to Maureen. Later reports revealed that Maureen had lost consciousness immediately after hitting the track and had to be tended to by medical staff right on the infield. She was then rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors confirmed that her head had taken a dangerous impact, but she had escaped with only a mild concussion and some deep bruises. She had blacked out instantly, but there was no brain bleed nor spinal trauma. Just hours later, she wrote a message on social media thanking fans for their support, calling the entire experience unreal and letting everyone know she would be okay. Reporters later called it one of the most disturbing on-track moments in recent memory. Level 2. Alone. All it took was one swing, and the entire show crumpled within seconds. On the second season of the show, alone, a survivalist named Mary-Kate Green was chopping firewood when the axe struck her forearm and sliced straight through a tendon.
I can't lift my thumb. I can't lift my thumb. I can't lift my thumb. I don't know how deep it is.
She tried to patch it up on camera, even showing the bandaged arm to the camera crew, insisting it wasn't that bad. But as her pain got worse and her fingers stopped moving, the crew finally whisked her away on a boat for better medical care. However, later she revealed that doctors had treated the wound without anesthesia. But Mary's accident wasn't an isolated incident. In fact, across different seasons of the show, at least 5 contestants suffered axe injuries. On the first ever UK season of Alone, a 49-year-old contestant named Mike was building a shelter on his first day when he injured himself on the leg. Then in season 3, contestant Zachary Galt severed a tendon and tapped out less than 2 weeks into the challenge. Competitors go through safety training, tool handling lessons, and even psychological evaluations, but no amount of prep can fully prepare anyone for the hazards they might encounter in the show. What makes Alone even more unnerving is that, unlike other reality shows where injuries get edited out, it always includes them in its final cut. Being in this studio surrounded by powerful lights and safe foam and everything, that's as alone as I want to get. Agony of defeat. The moment Vinko Bogataj pushed off the ground, he realized it was too fast and tried to abort the jump, but it was already too late. It was March of 1970, and Bogataj, a 22-year-old ski jumper from Yugoslavia, had been preparing for his third run during the World Ski Flying Championships in Oberstdorf, West Germany. Unexpectedly, the conditions had started to change. Wind gusts were getting worse and the track had ice all over. Then suddenly, the skis left the ramp, but Vinko Bogataj's body didn't follow. Instead, he twisted midair, lost his balance, and spun sideways off the jump. The footage shows him flying off the ramp, crashing through a support barrier, and tumbling head first into the spectators below. His skis snap off with his body flipping through the air. For a few seconds, it looked like the accident was fatal. Disturbingly, the show ABC's Wide World of Sports capitalized on this tragedy, making that crash the visual anchor for one of the most iconic sports intros in television history.
And unlike the supersonic Concorde, which had flown its maiden voyage the year before, this man wasn't out to reckon with speed. He was Vinko Bogataj, Yugoslavian ski jumper, and by virtue of his inability to get off the ground one day, he became a symbol of something so human to which we can all relate, the agony of defeat.
Every week, as the voice of Jim McKay said the words, "the agony of defeat," millions of Americans saw Vinko Bogataj's body cartwheel off that ramp in slow motion. Most viewers didn't even know who he was, but that failure sure did its job in grabbing the audience's attention. But what most people never realized was that Bogataj survived. Sure, he broke his ankle and had a concussion, but there were no permanent injuries. In fact, he recovered and quietly went back to ski jumping a few months later, having no idea his fall had become famous in the whole country. In an interview recounted by ESPN, Vinko Bogataj's daughter Sandra explained that he recalled poor visibility and bad track conditions just before the jump, but from that moment, he doesn't remember anything. While he might have forgotten the incident, the rest of the world that had witnessed it in real time would not. Newsflash. The cars sped towards him with no control, and for a moment, it didn't look like he'd survive. In March of 2016, KTVU reporter Alex Savage was standing near a sidewalk in Fremont, California, calmly delivering a live report from a 7-Eleven parking lot about a major train derailment.
when it went off the tracks, and obviously it was a chaotic and confusing situation.
The topic was routine, a train derailment from earlier that day, and nothing in the background gave any clue that something violent was about to happen. Just off frame at the intersection behind him, two cars had collided. One of them, a white sedan, was knocked off course and sent skidding toward the sidewalk. That car then launched toward the sidewalk where Savage and his cameraman, Chip Vaughn, were standing. A loud crash ripped through the mic as the car ultimately hit a light stand. Viewers saw the screen blur and spin, and as viewers held their breath, assuming the worst, Savage stepped out of frame at the last possible moment. After a moment, Savage can be heard revealing that he's okay.
Yes, everybody's okay. We just lost a 1K. That was it, a 1K. Both drivers are okay.
The driver of the out-of-control car was later identified as a woman in her 50s. According to Fremont police, she had been trying to avoid another vehicle that had run a red light. That footage quickly went viral because it captured what could have easily been a live televised. The footage is now used in some journalism training seminars to show how unpredictable live reporting can be. But even more troubling, Savage went back to reporting almost immediately. He appeared visibly emotional as he told viewers he was grateful to be okay.
This is the. I just would like to thank Chip for. Thanks, buddy.
No, you're all right.
Yeah.
You're all right.
Thanks.
No,
It's scary.
What we've seen so far were near misses, but from this point on, things are gonna cross all safety lines. So hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. Level 3, Wipeout Reboot. Tom was a constant on Wipeout in 2009.
24 competitors fall headlong into a battle for $50,000. One will become a champion, but all will wipe out.
He had just gotten married and joined the show during his honeymoon. At one point during his run on the obstacle course, he collapsed. Medics arrived quickly and moved him off camera, but within hours he was hospitalized with a stroke, and just a few days later, he died. The autopsy found that Sparks had a rare undiagnosed blood clotting disorder that made him more vulnerable to strain. The physical intensity of Wipeout triggered it, and his body couldn't recover. Viewers never saw any of it because it all happened behind the scenes, just like they didn't see what happened to Michael Paredes 9 years later. Michael Paredes had completed the obstacle course on the rebooted version of Wipeout, a show known for sending contestants flying into mud, water, and foam with cartoonish force.
Starts with our smack wall sweeper. Smacks you down and then sweeps you up. Then it's on to the sucker punch, followed by our bruise-inducing friends, the big ball. Looking full of themselves as ever.
He had taken his hits, cleared the obstacles, and climbed out just like every other competitor, but a few minutes later, after being helped off the course, he suddenly went limp and became unconscious. CPR was performed on site, but when that didn't work, he was instantly rushed to the hospital, where it was revealed he had gone into cardiac arrest. And unfortunately, Michael didn't make it. After the show finally changed. When Wipeout was rebooted in 2021, the producers quietly introduced stricter medical screenings, including full cardiac EKGs to catch underlying health problems.
Here's to the everyday warriors.
The ones who punch above their weight.
Those with a dream to conquer the most absurd obstacle course in the world. But what they don't know is that TBS
Has made the course even tougher.
They now had the right medical equipment to assess participants' health first before pushing them into intense stunts. I wonder if that's a good way if you needed to get like a health screening but you couldn't afford it because you live in America. If you're just like, yeah, I want to be a contestant on Wipeout. You do the screening and they're like, okay, your EKG looks good. And you go, all right, that's all my doctor needs to know. I don't want to do the obstacle course. Goodbye. Flaming arrow. You could see the exact moment they realized something had gone horribly wrong. It was a live broadcast of America's Got Talent show, and Canadian stunt performer Ryan Stock stood center stage with a metal rod lodged down his throat. His fiancée and performance partner, Amber Lynn, was armed with a crossbow. They'd done this act before. The idea was for the flaming arrow to fly through the air, strike the tip of the rod, and create a controlled spark effect. This was the kind of stunt designed to get the attention of the judges. Except that's not how things went. In the middle of the stunt, the arrow veered just slightly off course, and instead of hitting the target, it slapped Ryan's throat.
Is everything okay? Are you okay? He's okay. You sure? You're not on fire. I'm okay.
Ryan tore the rod out of his mouth and staggered back, clutching his neck. Producers immediately cut the camera while the host, Nick Cannon, stepped in with a strained voice and announced they were going on a commercial break. Although Ryan stated he was fine, viewers could not knock just how close to fatal the accident had come. A flaming arrow to the neck, even a slight deviation in angle or velocity, could have pierced his windpipe, his arteries, or worse, he could have collapsed right there. Later, Ryan, during an interview, surprisingly revealed that his partner's firing an arrow at him turned out to be the best thing that had ever happened to him.
You know, as soon as the arrow hit, I had no idea if I was on fire. I had no idea if I was injured, but it's such a funny thing, you know? It was the worst thing that ever happened, and then it went viral on the internet, and it's turned into one of the best things that ever happened.
Ryan also explained on social media and in an interview that the mishap had been caused by an equipment malfunction, specifically a broken notch on the crossbow that caused the arrow to veer off course.
Either way, you're shooting a flaming crossbow at your significant other, you're going to be nervous. This is the first time it's gone wrong ever for us. So, in complete shock. Felt like a dream.
He and Amber Lynn had done stunts like this dozens of times before. This was the one time it failed, and it failed in front of millions. They were eliminated from the competition soon after, but the clip still circulates in AGT compilations and to date remains one of the most tense moments in the show's history. Asia. No one knows what triggered it, but suddenly the bear Asia just snapped. This happened live on a morning television show in the 1980s, and although the exact country isn't confirmed, the footage has survived. A Russian martial artist walked onto set with his trained pet bear, a 7-foot Asiatic black bear named Asia. The bear was muzzled, declawed, and supposedly tame. And for the first few minutes, everything seemed fine. Viewers at home watched as the man bowed and gestured and the bear obeyed. A few seconds in, a woman quietly makes her way next to the bear and sits just behind it. She was just another guest in the audience who wanted a picture with him. At first, the bear didn't sense the woman, but when it turned slightly, it immediately charged straight at her, knocking her off the seat, pinning her to the floor as if she weighed nothing. The handlers tried to intervene by tugging at Asia's collar, even hitting it with what looked like open palm strikes, but nothing seems to work. A second man tries to pull the animal off and gets knocked to the floor himself. In the chaos, you can hear the camera crew scrambling to get out of the way, and through all of it, the bear stays locked in. By the time the crew managed to subdue it, extensive damage had already been done to the set. Shockingly, both the woman and the man who tried to help her survived. The bear had no claws, and the muzzle blocked its bite, so the attack, as violent as it looked, left them with only scrapes and bruises.
Both of the bear's victims escaped with only minor injuries, but they probably won't be working more animal shows anytime soon.
Some reports claim Asia was returned to captivity, others say she was quietly euthanized after the broadcast. Either way, one thing was made clear. no amount of training can erase the instincts of a wild animal. One magic trick. She slammed her hand down. There was a pause, and then she let out a scream that cut through the entire studio. It happened in 2016 on one of Poland's most watched daytime shows, Pytania na śniadanie, which means question for breakfast. This was a weekday variety show that blends celebrity interviews, news stories, and light entertainment to kick off the day. The magician was Marcin Poliniewicz, a regular guest who had pulled off several stunts before. That day, he came prepared with a magic trick known as the nail roulette, a stage illusion where 4 paper bags are placed upside down on a table. One of them hides a nail standing upright. The others are empty. The goal is simple. Slam your hand on the safe bags one by one and avoid the one with the nail. It's the kind of trick that always gets a reaction, but this time the reaction was a little different than anybody expected. Co-host Marzena Rogalska volunteered to participate. Viewers assumed the magician had already rehearsed everything beforehand, but what happened next made people scream at their TVs. One second, she was smiling, playing along. The next, Marzena Rogalska drove a 6-inch nail through her hand live on television. She lifted her hand, and the nail came with it. The look on her face was one of pure shock, obviously. The segment was unsurprisingly cut, and viewers were unsure whether what they'd seen was real or just part of the act. But this was, in fact, very real. Rogalska was rushed to the hospital, and later that day she posted a video from her hospital bed to let fans know she was okay. While the injury was painful, she hadn't lost any mobility. Still, the recovery doesn't make it easy to shake off the fact that things could have ended with far worse and more permanent damage. Level 4. Bobby's faceplant. Still confined in the heavy wooden frame, Davro was being guided toward the edge of the stage when he stumbled. It was supposed to be the big finale, a ridiculous, over-the-top slapstick gag to close out the show with a laugh. But instead, what the cast heard next would haunt them for a long time. Bobby Davro, one of the UK's most recognizable comedians at the time, was filming a variety show pilot called Public Enemy No. 1. The setup was classic British comedy. It was low budget, chaotic, and designed to be messy. The final sketch featured Davro locked inside a medieval pillory with his head and arms trapped between 2 wooden boards. The idea was to have fellow celebrities pelt him with fruit while the audience laughed. Then the bit would wrap, the credits would roll, and Davro would be freed from the stocks. But nobody could have imagined what would happen next. As he was being guided toward the stage with nothing but his face to absorb the fall, he dropped forward, slamming his full body and bones on the floor. Several crew members thought he'd just died on the spot. Keith Chegwin, one of the cast members, was standing just a few feet away. He later described seeing Davro motionless on the ground with blood pooling near his face. He said that although Davro was awake, he was clearly not in his right mind. They called the paramedics right away. Doctors later revealed just how close he came to death. The left side of his face had taken the full brunt of the fall. His nose was also broken in the fall when the pillory tipped over. If Davro hadn't instinctively tilted his head slightly before impact, the damage would have been far worse. An inch or two in the wrong direction could have crushed his skull and killed him instantly. Interestingly, and unsurprisingly, that moment was never aired. The footage was recorded but immediately shelved because producers killed the show before it reached broadcast. To this day, most people have never seen the footage, but those who were in the studio never forgot about it. Grape Lady. Two women stomp grapes on live morning TV excitedly, but very soon, one of them will be on the ground gasping for air. In 1998, Melissa Sander, a local reporter for Fox 5 Atlanta, was covering a winery festival in Georgia. Her assignment was to jump into a traditional grape stomping contest. Now, this was the kind where people roll up their pants, step barefoot into barrels, and crush grapes the old-fashioned way. Everything was lighthearted and silly, at first, until Sanders climbed up onto a wooden platform where two grape-filled barrels were mounted side by side. She and another woman began stomping furiously while the camera rolled, each trying to outpace the other. It was slippery and exactly the kind of harmless action that made for good morning television. But then the bit ended and Sander, still laughing, jokingly tried to squeeze in a few extra stomps after the timer ran out. She leaned forward, shifted her weight, and then she slipped. Her foot went out from under her on the slick grape skins. She lost her balance and fell off the raised platform entirely, landing hard, ribs first, onto the ground. For several seconds, she struggled to speak properly, screaming out in pain while stating that she could not breathe. Back in the studio, the anchors quickly realized the depth of what had happened and temporarily halted moving to the next segment.
We'll be back right after this.
What they didn't see, at least not until much later, was the actual depth of damage that had occurred. Sanders had broken several ribs in the fall and had to be hospitalized. She was kept under observation for internal injuries, and the recovery was slow and extremely painful. Because the clip didn't just air once, it became viral, with early internet forums picking it up. People passed it around as the Grape Lady video, laughing at the exaggerated fall and the bizarre sounds. Few people knew they were watching a woman actually get seriously injured. Later in an interview, Sander admitted how much it hurt to become an internet punchline while she was still healing. TV plunge. Yukino Kikuma smiled calmly at the camera. She was clipped into the safety line. The segment had been rehearsed, and her crew was ready. Unknown to the crew and the entire production team, things were not going to go as planned. Yukino was 26, a reporter for Fuji TV's popular morning show Mazamashi TV, and she had been tasked with demonstrating a rope evacuation device meant to simulate how people could escape from burning buildings. The segment was meant to be practical and informative, filmed on the 5th floor of the network's headquarters with cameras rolling live. Viewers expected to watch her gently descend to safety. Instead, they witnessed an accident happen in real time. The device malfunctioned the moment it was engaged. Whether it was human error or faulty equipment, the safety harness failed completely. Kikuma dropped like dead weight from the window, an uncontrolled fall from nearly 15 meters before crashing to the ground below. The audience would hear the screams of the production team as she vanished out the window behind her, plummeting nearly 50 feet down. The show instantly cut to another camera. Kikuma was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Her injuries were extensive, multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and a long period of unconsciousness. She would spend the next 3 months recovering, and somehow, despite the height of the fall, she survived with no permanent spinal damage. Fuji TV was hit with immediate backlash. Investigators discovered that the rope system had not been properly secured and the safety checks had failed. Viewers who turned in expecting light entertainment were instead left shaken by what they heard off camera. The footage still exists, but it's rarely shown in full publicly because the moment speaks for itself. Live burn. Believing it was time to start, the professional cyclist accelerated forward toward the line of pyrotechnics that had not yet been fired. But Turner remained in place, unaware that her safety window had just collapsed. The show started off as a typical segment on a lighthearted children's program, but ended up being one of the most dangerous on-air accidents in British TV history. Anthea Turner was 29 years old and one of the rising stars of British television when she joined UP2U, a Saturday morning show aimed at young audiences. Broadcast on BBC One and produced out of the BBC's Manchester studios, the show was designed to feel interactive and energetic, encouraging young viewers to call in or vote on what they wanted to see.
The show Up to You was a live Saturday morning children's television show that came from Manchester.
And Anthea, well, she's got the roving eye down at the Royal Tournament in Earls Court. Stand by your phones, here comes the show.
Turner had already earned a reputation as a confident and upbeat presenter, making her the perfect face for a program that wanted to feel fun and adventurous. But on July 15th, 1989, a planned stunt for the live show nearly cost her everything. That morning's episode included a live segment involving a motorbike stunt rider scheduled to drive at speed through a series of controlled pyrotechnic explosions known as flashpots. These firework-style effects were set to detonate in a planned sequence, creating a dramatic visual wall of fire as the rider passed through.
The big idea was that I would pick up from London and say, I'm supposed to be taking part in a motorbike display, but I can't see any motorbikes.
Anthea Turner's role was simple. She would stand at a safe distance and introduce the spectacle, hyping it up for viewers at home. As Turner stood on the motorcycle track, still mid-sentence, the rider received a premature cue from the floor crew. He drove straight forward toward the unfired pyrotechnics. The explosion occurred milliseconds later. The bike tripped the flashpots at exactly the wrong moment, causing a line of fireballs to ignite just as Turner stood next to them. The resulting blast erupted directly beside her, sending a shockwave of heat and flame that knocked her to the ground.
And if you want something to happen to you on
Viewers, mostly children, watched in stunned silence as the smoke cleared to reveal Turner crumpled on the floor, her hair visibly singed and her white outfit charred. The control room scrambled to cut away from the live feed while production staff rushed to her side.
A few minutes ago, you might have just seen something a bit dangerous happen to Anthea. Just here to say she's okay, she's just gone to first aid.
The broadcast didn't resume for several minutes, and parents who had been watching with their kids began calling the station in panic, demanding to know whether Turner had survived. She had survived, but barely. Emergency responders quickly arrived, and Turner was taken to a nearby hospital. The burns were not life-threatening, but they were painful and required treatment. The fallout inside the BBC was immediate and serious. An internal investigation revealed that there had been a failure in communication between the floor manager and the stunt coordinator. The timing of the explosion had not been double-checked, and Turner's position had not been cleared before the rider was signaled. This was a major failure, given that the broadcast was live and targeted at children. After recovering from her injuries, Anthea Turner returned to television, eventually becoming one of the most recognizable faces in British daytime TV throughout the 1990s. Level 5, SummerSlam. For Steve Austin, SummerSlam was meant to be another milestone in his professional wrestling history, and he was prepared to face off against Owen Hart in the Intercontinental Championship.
SummerSlam, the reigning Intercontinental Champion got the 1-2-3 in the 10-man tag, but the bottom line is a promise this stone-cold killer intends to keep.
But the moment that happened, it would mark him for life. The move was a pile driver, a dangerous but long-used wrestling technique in which one wrestler drops another head first onto the mat. It's only safe if done precisely with tight control and correct positioning. Owen Hart had used a seated version of the pile driver before, but on this night, Steve Austin's head was positioned too low between Owen's legs. And when Hart sat down for the move, all of his weight came down on Austin's neck with nothing but the mat to stop it.
Let's see what Austin can do with Eamon. No, how about that? Tombstone pile driver, saves to the Undertaker.
He instantly collapsed and his arms went limp. In commentary, announcers tried to stay composed, but you could hear it in their voices that something had gone horribly wrong.
Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's done, you're right, he's done. And he could very well be.
Inside the ring, Owen Hart circled slowly, staying in character but clearly trying to buy time. He had just dropped his opponent on the top of his spine and Austin wasn't responding. Later, Austin would describe the moment in brutally clear terms. As soon as my head hit that mat, I was thinking Christopher Reeve. Which, if you don't know, he used to play Superman, and then after a spinal injury from a accident riding a horse, he was paralyzed for the rest of his life. Seconds ticked by, each one dragging longer than the last, and then finally, there was movement from the wrestler. Somehow, without the use of his arms, he slid across the mat and fell onto Hart in what looked like a weak, barely held pin. It was a finish that was never supposed to happen that way, but had to be done on the fly because he could no longer perform any physical maneuvers. He had broken his neck. According to the diagnosis, he had severely bruised his spinal cord and cracked vertebrae. He was told afterward that a single extra millimeter of pressure more and his spinal cord could have severed entirely. And that usually always leads to death. As one can imagine, the recovery took months. There were moments where doctors feared he wouldn't return to wrestling at all. And even when he did later that year, Austin had to change everything about his style. The aggressive, high-impact style that had made him a fan favorite was replaced by a smarter, more calculated in-ring approach that extended his career. But the damage was permanent, and the injury would follow him for the rest of his life, contributing directly to his early retirement in 2003.
Bottom line, I guess you could say that's what happened, but man, I was having a lot of health problems with my nerves and stuff like that. I just said, hey, screw it, I'm out of here.
WWE later banned the seated pile driver outright. This was the closest wrestling came to witnessing a life end mid-match. Crushed.
Good morning, George. America's Got Talent Extreme is designed to showcase daredevils doing jaw-dropping stunts. In this case, the stunt and the performer were death-defying. The stuntman meant to escape from a straitjacket hanging in the air, suspended between two cars, dozens of feet up. Things went nearly fatally wrong.
Jonathan Goodwin had been buried alive, dangled from cranes, and had even deliberately set himself on fire.
Come on.
But none of that could prepare him or anyone for what happened in 2021 during a rehearsal for America's Got Talent Extreme. This was a show built around danger and pushing physical limits. On October 14th, 2021, Goodwin was hoisted 30 feet in the air, hanging upside down in a straitjacket. On either side of him, two full-sized cars were suspended from steel cables rigged to swing like wrecking balls. The idea was for him to escape the restraints, drop to safety on an airbag below, and the cars would smash together harmlessly above him. But the timing had to be exact, and it wasn't. Just seconds into the rehearsal, something slipped. Either the trigger was early or Goodwin was delayed. The two cars released and began swinging toward each other. Goodwin was still stuck upside down, still trying to wriggle free, still in the exact spot where the vehicles would collide. The impact was horrifying. Goodwin's body was caught between the two cars just before they exploded into flames. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the rig gave out. According to eyewitness accounts, Goodwin fell roughly 30 to 40 feet and missed the airbag that was meant to catch him. This contributed to the severity of his injuries. The damage was beyond what most people would survive. His internal organs had taken a massive hit. He had third-degree burns, and most devastating of all, his spinal cord had been severed permanently. Goodwin was airlifted to the hospital and placed in critical care. Over the next few months, he underwent multiple life-saving surgeries. For 4 months, he remained hospitalized. By the time he was finally discharged in early 2022, his condition had stabilized, but he would never walk again.
The spinal surgeon said that my injury was the worst that he'd ever seen. Also told me that there was a really good chance I wouldn't make it through the surgery.
Goodwin later sued NBC and Fremantle, the show's producers, for negligence, alleging that the setup lacked basic safety measures and that he had raised concerns beforehand. The show obviously didn't air the stunt, and AGT Extreme paused production entirely. Last walk.
Carl Wallenda, possibly the world's best-known circus performer, fell to his death today doing an outdoor stunt in Puerto Rico.
It looked like just another stunt, the kind that he had done for decades, but this time, things would not turn out the way everyone hoped it would. On March 22nd, 1978, 73-year-old Carl Wallenda stepped out onto a high wire stretched between two towers of the Condado Plaza Hotel in San Juan, Puerto Rico. It was a short promotional walk that he had done hundreds of times across baseball stadiums and city skylines. He wasn't wearing any kind of safety harness, secure in the fact that he had successfully completed stunts such as this without any protective gear. The cable was over 100 feet above the pavement, and an estimated 30,000 spectators were present to watch the event live. Carl took one step after the other. You could see him adjusting, arms raised wide, knees bent just slightly, trying to find the rhythm. However, midway through the walk, the cable swayed hard. He paused and tried to balance, but nothing worked. Viewers saw him drop fast and finally out of frame. His body struck the pavement behind a wall, and this fall was over 10 stories. By the time paramedics reached him, he was already dead. What made it worse was how quickly it all fell apart. Some believe he may have suffered a heart attack mid-air, but the autopsy confirmed that it was blunt force trauma from the fall. The wind and the loosened cable had done the rest. Carl Wallenda once said, "Life is on the wire, everything else is just waiting." That afternoon, the wire, unfortunately, gave out. Level 6, Texas Ranger.
It seems we've seen it too many times to count. Fans leaping from their seats, leaning over railings in desperate pursuit of a foul ball, the most American of souvenirs. But this time, one fan went too far, and for it, he paid the ultimate price. And we want to warn you, some of this may be very hard to watch.
Nothing about this moment looked dangerous until it was. It all started as one of those small, happy moments that happen at baseball games all the time. A player flips a ball into the crowd, and a parent leans forward, hoping to give their child something to remember the day by. Shannon Stone was sitting in the front row of the left field stands with his young son, watching the Texas Rangers play under the bright lights. He was surrounded by thousands of other fans, and with television cameras sweeping the stadium as part of the live broadcast. Later in the game, outfielder Josh Hamilton tossed a foul ball toward the crowd, the kind of routine gesture players make dozens of times a season without thinking much about it. Stone leaned forward over the low railing, stretched his arm out, and caught the ball cleanly. Unfortunately, that singular innocent catch would cost him everything. Because the railing in front of him was only a few feet high, and since his weight had moved forward as he reached, Stone's momentum carried him past the point of balance.
That's why there was time taken.
Fans nearby later described seeing his body tip forward suddenly, almost as if gravity grabbed him mid-celebration. Within seconds, he went headfirst over the railing and disappeared from view, falling roughly 20 feet onto the concrete area behind the outfield wall. Stone was still conscious when help reached him, and witnesses later shared the detail that made the moment even more devastating. His first concern was not himself, but making sure the baseball he caught was given to his son. Within minutes, his condition deteriorated. While being transported for medical treatment, Stone went into cardiac arrest due to severe internal injuries caused by the fall, including blunt force trauma and a ruptured artery. He was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. Josh Hamilton later spoke publicly about how deeply the incident haunted him, explaining that the simple act of tossing the ball, something meant to create joy, had unintentionally set the chain of events in motion. At Rangers Ballpark, a statue was later installed depicting Shannon Stone and his son, permanently marking the spot where a routine moment turned fatal. Love of a father.
Yeah, at the Daytona International Speedway, where the man who's won more races there than any driver in history loses when it counts most. Dale Earnhardt bidding for a second Daytona 500 checkered flag. And what he hoped would start a season to win a record 8 points championship died in a last lap crash.
The camera didn't catch the sound of the impact. It just showed the car vanish into the final corner. To millions of people watching live, the car crash didn't seem that unusual. Dale Earnhardt had hit the wall before. Besides, there was no fireball or spectacular flip. It was just a sharp hit on the last turn of the last lap. What the camera didn't catch, however, was what had happened inside the car.
Inside, inside, inside. Rewind, inside, inside, inside. Detail.
Dale Earnhardt was running third. He was blocking and deliberately holding position so his son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and teammate Michael Waltrip could take first and second. As he moved to defend their line, his car made contact. It was a light tap, but at over 160 miles per hour, that's all it took. His car snapped right and went head-on into the concrete barrier. Inside his cockpit, Earnhardt's body jerked forward violently. He wasn't wearing a Hans device, the head and neck support restraint that was still optional at the time. That meant his head and neck took the full force of the stop. The cameras stayed on the track following the celebration. Nobody realized what had just happened, not the commentators, not the fans. It was only after Ken Schrader, another driver involved in the wreck, jumped out of his car and ran toward Dale's window that the people realized something bad had happened. Schrader looked inside and immediately waved for help. The broadcast cut away fast as medics swarmed the vehicle. Within the hour, NASCAR made the announcement.
But after the accident in turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500, we've lost Dale Earnhardt.
Dale Earnhardt had died from a basilar skull fracture. A basilar skull fracture is a break at the base of the skull where the spine and brain connect, threatening both major blood vessels and the spinal cord. This is the same injury that had claimed multiple racers in the years leading up to 2001. This news completely broke the racing world. Earnhardt was the face of NASCAR, and now, all at once, he was gone. In view of the risks, the Hans device, which was once optional, became mandatory. NASCAR introduced safer barriers and energy-absorbing walls at every major track. Level 7. Phoenix collision. A man in a stolen white pickup was tearing through traffic as cameras followed him from above. Viewers at home were glued to their screens, watching the chaos play out in real time.
Oh, jeez. 3, I'm right over you. 15's over top of you. I'm over the top of you.
Cameras were locked on the streets, and the audience watching from home had no idea that 2 of those choppers were on a slow, invisible path toward each other. At 12:46 p.m., one of the feeds abruptly vanished from the screen. At that moment, producers inside the newsroom were still focused on the chase. But outside, above Steele Indian School Park, the nightmare was already in motion. One helicopter's blades had clipped the other's tail. The impact sent both machines into a violent spiral, with one flipping upside down and breaking apart mid-air. The other fell almost straight down, and they both hit the ground within seconds. This was a public park in the middle of Phoenix. While no one on the ground was hurt, inside the stations, people lost their lives. The victims were pilot Craig Smith and photographer Rick Krolak from KNXV-TV, and pilot Scott Bowerbank and photographer Jim Cox from KTVK. The official investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, determined the collision's probable cause was due to both pilots' failure to see and avoid the other helicopter. The general consensus was that both pilots were focused on filming and reporting duties rather than solely flying.
With all the checks and balances in place, he is quick to add, pilots can never afford to sit back and become lackadaisical.
If you run into another vehicle up in the air, you're going to fall to the earth, and there's always severe consequences with that.
There was no coordinated air traffic control for the media helicopters at the time. It was just choppers circling a moving target, all trying to stay close without overlapping. And in doing so, it forced the entire news industry to take a hard look at how they were willing to push for live coverage.
Those members of our community lost today on our TV sets, and the tragedy that we faced as a community is particularly strong and painful today.
To this day, the Phoenix News chopper collision remains one of the most disturbing moments in broadcast history. Hazel's disaster. Fans were already throwing punches before the match even started. And when the crowd finally surged, it only took seconds for the wall to give out. The Hazel Stadium disaster was one of the few tragedies to unfold live on TV in real time, with millions watching as people dropped. It was supposed to be the 1985 European Cup final, Liverpool versus Juventus. Juventus fans had packed in with families thinking they'd be safe. But Liverpool hooligans were right next to them, and within minutes, they started rushing the fence. Juventus fans tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. A concrete retaining wall boxed them in, while the police stood on the wrong side of the chaos, unable to reach them in time.
Said Liverpool supporters, many of whom had been drinking heavily, mounted 2 or 3 charges against Juventus fans before the 1985 European Cup final.
The crowd continued to push as more people ran. Then, before anyone had the time to escape, the wall came crashing down. Dozens were crushed under the weight, with 39 people, mostly Juventus fans. 600 more were injured, and the game hadn't even kicked off yet.
Some British and Italian supporters had tickets for the same section of the stadium. 39 people, 34 of them Italians, were when a wall collapsed under the pressure.
Investigators would later uncover a string of failures that made this disaster almost unavoidable. The collapsing wall was actually a perimeter retaining wall, never intended to absorb the force of thousands of fans pressing against it. Engineers had previously raised concerns about the structural safety of that section of the stadium, but UEFA still allowed the match to go on at Hazel. But what made this even more sickening was that despite the obvious tragedy, the game still went on. Officials chose to let the game continue, even with still lying on the pitch. Their reasoning was to prevent a full-blown panic or stampede inside the stadium, but it was already too late for that.
Presenting the Belgian government's case for extradition, Michael Sherrard QC said the Heysel Stadium riot was the greatest ever man-made tragedy to afflict a sporting event.
14 Liverpool fans were later convicted of while UEFA and Belgian police were blasted for ignoring the warning signs. In the end, every English football club was banned from European competition for 5 years. Seriously, sports fans who throw little riots and stuff like that and get all worked up about their team winning or losing or the game not even starting, you're a bunch of overgrown temper tantrum children, and I can't stand you. Act like adults. Ugh. Every incident in this iceberg was unexpected. But what happens when producers intentionally cross all sane lines in the name of views? Find out in the most disturbing game show.